We're continuing this series of talks on stories. I'm going to tell a story from the Gold Mountain days, early Gold Mountain days. Sherfa always ate upstairs, but occasionally ate in the dining hall. And I'd bring him his food when he was eating upstairs, and if he was eating downstairs, I would escort him into the dining hall. So one day when Sherfa was going to eat in the dining hall, after the meal ceremony, I escorted him into the dining hall. We got to his table, there was no food on it. And Sherfa looked at the table and just turned around and started walking back into the Buddha hall. And the servers, they were trying to persuade Sherfa to wait a moment. They'd bring him his food. But Sherfa would have none of that, and he continued walking into the Buddha hall. And I followed him. And then Sherfa sat down in the center cushion of the bowing cushion and folded his legs in full lotus and started to sit in meditation. And so I figured, well, if Sherfa's not eating today, I'm not eating either. So I sat on the meditation bench a few feet from Sherfa in the center, on the side of the hall. And Sherfa looked at me for a moment as if to say, oh, you're not eating today? But he didn't say anything. He just looked towards the Buddha and entered samadhi. So I meditated the whole meal time with Sherfa alone in the Buddha hall. And it was really fantastic. And then when I heard the meal offering in the dining hall, that the meal was over, and I knew everybody would be filing into the Buddha hall, I had a flash, an idea to make Sherfa a vegetable drink that I used to drink when I was a surfer on the north shore of Oahu. So I made Sherfa this carrot and celery, and I made this really incredible juice really fast. I had to really be fast. And while they were closing off the meal in the Buddha hall, I made this drink. And when I came into the Buddha hall with the drink, everybody was gathered around Sherfa, talking to him. I don't know what all they were saying. And I came up to Sherfa. I said, Sherfa, have this drink. And he paused for a moment, looked at it, and then accepted it. And it's difficult to describe the expression on Sherfa's face when he tasted that drink. He was just in heaven. It was like I had served him ambrosia, and he finished the whole thing in a second. And then he said, what is this? It was an incredible drink, and very healthy. So fast forward now, about 30 years. I hadn't seen Sherfa in decades. I had been living in Nepal, as some of you may know, in India. So it happened that Sherfa this was in the early 90s, that Sherfa was staying in a house where people were caring for him. He had a long illness. And Shifu was being cared for in a house, and that was a secret location that I found out from Red Claire Hung Show. And I called up the house and I said, I'd like to come over and see the master. And Shifu got on the phone and I discussed coming over with my children and my wife. And so Shifu agreed and set up a time. I went over one evening, but before I was going, I thought, well, what should I bring for Shifu? I hadn't seen him in so long. And then I thought, at that time I had some money, and I thought, well, maybe I'll bring an offering of some money. And then I thought, no, money is not appropriate right now. I hadn't seen Shifu in all of this time. I don't want to give him something like that, some money or some material gift or fancy thing or watch or anything. Then I remembered that drink. That drink came to mind. And I thought, I'm going to make sure for that drink again. I made a whole quart of it. And we all went to the house, my family, we went to that house. And Shifu was very, very, very sick. The people were feeding him with a spoon. And I sat the drink on the table in front of him. And my kids, my wife Kamala, and I, we all bowed. And my children were very small at the time. Probably about, well, not that small. They've been bowing since they were able to walk. But they automatically bowed to Shifu. They were about 5 and 6 or 6 or 7 at the time. And Shifu looked at the kids and he says, oh, you have many kids. I didn't know at the time, but I was going to have one more, so that's probably what was the indicator of that. And my wife and my kids, we all gathered around Shifu while they were feeding him some food, while his attendants were. And then I proceeded to talk to the master about living in Nepal and so forth. But then the time went on, and Shifu and I talked for probably a half hour or so. And then I noticed that the attendants had moved the drink from the table, so I was really upset about that. I thought, oh, well, I came with an offering, but they took the offering away, and so I found out, from the attendants that he wasn't supposed to drink anything, like anything but the food they offered him. So I felt bummed, and I thought, well, it's not going to happen, I guess. But then, while I was talking to Shifu said to the attendants, what happened to the drink? The attendant says, you can't have it, Shifu. Only food that we make you can have. And Shifu said, no, you have to bring the drink back. And he demanded they bring the drink back, and he took it in his hand, and he drank the whole thing. It was almost a quart of juice. And he loved it. I don't know if he remembered the time in the dining hall, in the Buddha hall, when he drank that same drink. But he was just as happy as ever. So that's the story of the drink, and that's the story today. We're continuing this series of talks on stories